welcome, especially to those of you in the first row. She's my favorite, right there. I won't say any more. It's good to be with you. Anybody have a dog? Yeah? I don't want to leave the cat people out. How many of you own cats? There we go. We do. We do. Mango's our cat. Love our cat. We love our animals, don't we? Dogs, cats, whatever they might be. Recently, there was a lost dog sign that was posted in a small town by the dog's owner. And evidently, he was offering a big cash reward, although that's not the point of bringing up the story. I wanted to read to you what he wrote on the sign describing his lost dog. The sign read as follows: "He's only got 3 legs, he's blind in his left eye, missing an ear, has no tail, and he's almost deaf. His name is Lucky." What a great name for apparently what was a great and beloved dog. The luckiest part about Lucky was that he had an owner that couldn't wait to get him back. So, dogs and cats, right? Raise your hand if you've ever lost your dog or your cat. Yeah? Keep your hand raised if your dog or cat came back. You get them back? I mean, that's the best part, right? It's so hard to lose the animals we love. We live, like you do, in coyote territory. It seems like all of Orange County is coyote territory. And we've lost a couple of cats to coyotes. So with our cat Mango, I'm paranoid. Talk about anxiety. I always get anxious that he goes out early in the morning and it's quiet and the crazy coyote that lives in our neighborhood is going to grab him someday. We love our animals, right? And when they're gone, we can't wait. We pray they come back. We have a lot of feeling when it comes to our pets, but our pets aren't the only things that we love. Have you ever lost something else that for you was of great value? It may have cost a lot of money, or maybe it didn't, but for you it had great sentimental meaning, deep significance. Maybe it's an engagement ring or a wedding ring. Anybody ever lost a ring? Or a watch that your spouse gave you, or something, some piece of jewelry, or it's hard to lose things, isn't it? And we want them back, and when we get them back, oh, it feels great. And as much as we love our pets, and as much as we love the things that people that are important to us give us, and we want to hold on to those things, none of those things compare to losing maybe a member of your family. According to the National Runaway Safe Line, formerly the National Runaway Switchboard, as if that detail matters, between 1.6 and 2.8 million youth run away each year in the United States alone. 1.6 to 2.8 youth run away each year in our country, beginning, statistically speaking, as early as the age of 10. Wow, that's a lot of people. It's a lot of kids. It's been said that one of the oldest human needs is having someone to wonder where you are when you don't come home. We want to be missed, right? We want to matter to somebody. Okay. How about God? We want to matter to Him, right? So here's a question for you. If God was actually your physical human parent and you were a runaway, how long do you suppose it would take Him to notice that you were missing? And upon realizing you were missing, how much would it bother Him? At all? Would He miss you? Would He hope every day for your return? And would He even go looking for you? If God were your parent and you were a runaway, what would His emotional state be in your absence? Even more to the point, let's say as you ran away, and of course it's on purpose, right? Otherwise they wouldn't call you a runaway. But as you ran away, you ran into a lifestyle that's completely the opposite of what God would want for you as your parent, right? You went to look for love and meaning and significance, let's just say, in all the wrong places. How would He feel then if He knew that's what you were doing as you'd run away? Do you perceive God as your Father in that scenario to be a father who would say, you know what, they've gone too far. You've crossed the line that you shouldn't have crossed, and God, I'm really not going to be waiting for this one to come back. And I'm really not going to do anything to prompt their return They've left. I'm done. If God were your father and you ran away and you chose a completely different moral lifestyle, let's say, what would his attitude be toward you? If you were lost, what would God feel? Would getting you back be a priority, or would he have better things to attend to? It's common with all of us that we don't fully comprehend or grasp the quality of, the depth of the love of God for us. And obviously that's why I prayed the way I prayed at the beginning, because if we have a need, and we have many, but principal among our needs would be to grow in our understanding, not just between our ears, but in our hearts, of the quality, of the depth of the love that God as Father has for you. That's where we need to grow. Because all other growth will be stunted if the growth and understanding God's love doesn't occur. Because really all of our human problems are a product of not understanding how deeply we're loved. And I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but I want to set the stage. That's what you need most. It's what I need most. Where is freedom as a believer? Freedom comes, it's a byproduct of something else. It comes as you get to the place where you're convinced of your value before God. And that as you take off, there's nothing that you could do that would cause him to say, I'm getting off the train right here. I don't want them back. There's nothing you could do to cause him to respond that way. That's where freedom begins. That's where life begins. And so we all need to grow. We live in a world where love is earned, right? We do certain things and that causes someone else to love us because we've done certain things. Or we do certain things and that causes someone not to love us as much because we've hurt them, right? And so love or the lack thereof is a consequence of our behaving. And with God, he says it's not that way. And we think, how can it not be that way, God? That's my experience with everything else in this life. That's what people's experience is with me. And so it seems odd, peculiar, impractical, and not even possible. And yet, that's the love of God for us. And so what do I need? What do we need? I think not only in Scripture, but particularly this portion of Luke's Gospel where Jesus tells a story to people who needed to grow in their understanding of love. I find it really important to dive into this parable. We looked at it a couple of weeks ago. We're going to finish it today because it's in this parable that Jesus shows us what the love of the Father is like. And if Brian needs anything so that he becomes the person he's supposed to be, it's understanding how deeply he loves me. And friend, I'm not alone. So, if you've ever wondered the quality of God's love, if you go missing, would he want you back? If you ever wonder that, then engage your heart and your spirit with this story again. You'll see Luke chapter 15. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to him to listen to him. Both the Pharisees and the scribes, those are the religious leaders of the Jews, who had a very particular way of looking at what's acceptable and not. They were the behavior police. Both the Pharisees and the scribes began grumbling. Why? Because Jesus had tax collectors and sinners in his presence. And what are they saying to each other? This man receives sinners and he eats with them. Now imagine the scene. Jesus, it's a public setting. He's in Jerusalem. He's coming to the end of his life. People have come to know him as someone they like to be, especially sinners. So much so that he got the nickname Friend of Sinners. Why? Because all the sinners love to be with him. Well, who are the sinners? Well, we know everybody. But in this culture, they were very particularly behaving sorts of people. People who weren't faithful in their marriage. People who took things that weren't theirs. People who would sell their bodies to make some money. People who would serve as tax collectors for the Roman. These notorious types. Those were the sinners. But they love to be with Jesus, and so they're with Jesus. And Jesus has an idea. He says, why don't we sit down and eat? It's the middle of the day. Let's have lunch. So Jesus is playing a host of sinners. The morality police see what's going on. They stand just close enough to allow Jesus and these notorious sinners to hear of their grumbling. I mean, how rude is that? This Jesus guy, look what he's doing. Again. There he's at it again. I can't believe he's actually eating with him. Eating with someone was a sign of acceptance, friendship, connectivity. Let's be in relationship. So what do we see here, even in the first 3 verses? There are 2 categories of people. There's one group that came to listen to Jesus, to be with Jesus. There's another group that came to lecture to Jesus by way of their grumbling. There's 2 types of sinners also in his presence. One group is made up of classic law breakers, right? Do not steal. They steal. Classic law breakers. The other group is made up of classic law keepers, and arrogant ones at that. Both groups are made up entirely of sinners. Those that are with Jesus having the meal, those that are grumbling off to the side. Both groups are made up entirely of sinners. In one group, they're very much aware of their sinful state. The other group has not the slightest clue of their sinfulness. They just don't see themselves that way. So Jesus sees the need to tell a story. Again, the focus of the story is not on the types of sinning that the different groups do, although we'll see it. The focus of this parable, Jesus wants us to understand the heart of the Father. How does he feel when a prodigal, when a runaway comes home? How does he feel about that recovery process? You know what he feels? Well, we're going to find out. And that's what Jesus wants us to see. What's going on in the heart of the Father when the wayward one comes home, and when the one who doesn't think they're wayward catches a clue and realizes that in fact they are. So we'll pick up this scene first by going over the entire parable. We're going to read it again. You'll see initially about the younger son. This is a story about the unconditional, extravagant love of a father who had two boys. This is how Jesus tells it. And he's telling it both to the notorious sinners as well as the grumbling ones. He said, a father had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me. So, what does the father do? He divided his wealth between them. And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country, and there he squandered his estate with loose living. Now, when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. There's an understatement. Verse 15. So he went and he hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, and he sent him into the fields to feed his swine, his pigs. There's some cultural, religious humor on Jesus' part. And he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pods that the pigs or the swine were eating, and no one was giving him anything. So he's in quite a bad position. Verse 17, turning point. But when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, but I'm dying here with hunger? So makes up a plan. I'll get up, I'll go to my father, I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me one of your hired men. So he got up and he came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet, and bring the fatted calf, kill it, and let us eat and let us celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. And they began to what? Celebrate. All right, so 3 weeks ago we looked at that passage. Just to bring us back into it again, you know, what is it that was so shocking? What was so wrong about the father's behavior in this particular situation? Well, we know that the son, the younger son, he demands his inheritance early. I mean, it's early if you're talking to your dad, because that means he's still alive. So if you're saying to your dad, I need my inheritance, hello, it's too soon to ask. You don't ask. You wait till he passes away, and then what was his becomes yours. Whatever portion is designated to you in this culture. So he's asking. At the very least, it means, I don't really care a whole lot about your feelings, Father. At the very worst, it means, I'm actually treating you as if you're already dead, because I'm asking for something that I can't get until you are. But I'd like mine early. You can see the offense, right? Also, we learned a couple of weeks ago that in asking for the money, he wasn't asking for his inheritance, because the inheritance includes responsibility for the provision, the care, the protection of the larger village. As a young boy, he grew up to be a man, and he needed to be in a position of caring for, providing, and protecting for the larger village. He contributed to that. That's part of the responsibility side of his inheritance. So the word used isn't give me my inheritance. It's give me the money related to my inheritance. That's the part I want, and I'll be done with you and the village. So it's not only offensive to the father, it's offensive to the village. Well, what's equally offensive, if not more offensive, is how the father responds. It says he gives it to him. He gives it to him. He doesn't scold him, reprimand him, punish him. Even privately, in this culture, he should do so publicly because the shame was a public shame. He's walking away from the village as a whole. But there's none of that. So he lets him go. Nothing goes as planned for the prodigal, aided by a famine. Remember, Jesus is creating this story to make a point. Every detail he puts in there is for a reason. Jesus throws a famine. You got a lot of money? That's all right. I can take care of that. Here comes a famine. He spends it on loose living, and then the famine doesn't help. So finally, in his predicament, he comes to his senses. It's the turning point for the younger son. As he comes to his senses, what's happening is he's starting to remember what is real. My dad really is a good guy, right? So he wants to go back. Going back, he thinks, I better come up with a pretty good speech. So he creates one. 3 parts. I've sinned against heaven, I've sinned against you. That's what I'm going to tell my dad. Dad, I'm also no longer worthy to be your son. I get that. I've blown it. So thirdly, make me one of your hired men. Make me an employee. At least make me that. That'll be better than here dying of starvation. So he recites this, he repeats this, right? He rehearses this speech, 3 parts, all the way home. All the way home. Well, the father's the first to see the son because the father's been looking for the son every single day. Would God miss you if you were missing? What's Jesus saying here? If you were gone, would he be missing you? Well, the father in this story that represents God is waiting every day for that younger son. So that he's the first one to see him. And when he sees, what does he feel? Anger. Oh, I got a plan. I know what I'm going to do. He's going to wish he'd never been born when I get my hands a hold of him. No. It says he feels compassion. And the compassion compels him to do what? To run. To do, again, what's culturally shameful for an adult. You don't show your bare legs, especially if they look like mine. But you have to show your bare legs if you're going to run because they wear these tunics, right? These long robes. The father isn't even concerned that he shows his legs. He doesn't care what other people think. All he cares about is getting to the place where he can embrace his son. So feeling compassion and an incredible sense of joy, he pulls up his coat, his cloak, and he runs. And as he runs, he's screaming at his son. And you can imagine what he's screaming. I've been waiting for you. I'm so glad you're back. Get over here, get over here. And the son's looking like, okay, what's going to happen next, right? And he's got his speech. I got all 3 parts down. Don't forget it, dummy. You got to get it down clear, because dad's got to know that you're not trying to assume anything about your return. And as he's thinking that through, the dad just grabs him. Can you see his arms are stuck here because he's getting a bear hug. And it says that his father then, after running, embraces him and kisses him. And he kisses him and kisses him and kisses him. Can you imagine how awkward that feels? Especially if you're the guilty one, and he is, right? And he's got his speech. He thought he'd just from a distance start talking and give his speech, right? His dad won't. He's being held by his dad. Finally, he gets some distance and he breaks into his speech. Father, I've sinned against heaven and in your sight. True. Father, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. True again. But he never gets to the 3rd part. How do I see this? I see this, I think, very practically, very logically, as that father taking his hand and putting it over his son's mouth. He knows where that speech is going. He can probably hear the son mumble it underneath his hand. Make me one of your knock it off. Don't presume that your identity has changed just because you've disobeyed. You were my son, you are my son, you always will be my son. So I don't want to hear any talk about identity change. Don't ask me to make you a hired slave, a hired servant. That's not who you are. So you just hush, you be quiet. And he turns and he calls his servants over. Get the fatted calf, get the musicians. Get the wine. Get everything ready. My son is gone. He's come back. Let's throw a party. And that's how we ended last week. And what did we learn? As Darrell Johnson would say, the message to the younger son and anyone who's like that prodigal son is that it's safe to come home. When God is your father, what's it like going home when you've really blown it? It's safe. It's safe. Because he's been waiting for you, praying for you, hoping for you. And when he sees you, get ready for a hug. For all of us as prodigals, Jesus wants us to know that with God as Father, it's safe to come home. So the question again is, if you ran away, and we all do, when you do, does God miss you? Does He watch for you? Does He hope for you every day? Would He come running to you? Would He embrace you? Would He kiss you? Would He celebrate? Imagine the absurdity of that. How does that work in our world? You celebrate the guilty party? You celebrate them. Well, in God's economy, you do. Like I said, I have a lot to learn about God's love because it's a love that confounds me. But there's more to the story. Jesus doesn't stop. Why? Well, remember, there's two types of sinners in His presence, right? Those that behave and do everything they're supposed to, but their hearts are in the wrong place. They conceal their sinfulness. But the other group, it's very obvious. So you have two people in His presence. Interestingly enough, you have two different types of people in the story, two different sons that behave in different ways, but the common denominator is they both have walked away from God. So let's take a look at the elder son. Scene 1, celebration and anger. So there is some celebrating going on, right? The younger son comes home and it is loud, it's raucous. And even the villagers who might be upset with the father for being so lenient, so permissive in their minds about the younger son, even the villagers who were offended that this younger son took off and leaves the village ultimately in greater jeopardy down the road, even they culturally would attend this party. They're culturally bound to. And if they need to fake it. Some probably got over it and they were happy that the father was happy. But nonetheless, this is a party for the entire village. And a fatted calf, he didn't say half a calf. It's, go kill the fatted calf. You're the fat one, right? The one that's ready to be eaten. It's for everybody. And so they all show up. And as soon as the father decides to butcher the calf, that is your invitation. That's the invitation for everyone. And so all attention is focused on the father's house. The cooking of the calf will be timed for early evening when the rest of the men come back from the fields. They'll hear the music, they'll see the smoke rising, and they know it's time for a party. A lot of things are in motion at the same time. People show up, there's no official start time. You just make your way over there. So people are arriving, right? One after the other as they are. There's singing, there's dancing, there's drinking, there's celebrating. You can smell the aroma of the meat burning, being cooked. In my house, maybe it'd be burning if I'm doing the cooking. So who else is coming home from the field? Look at verse 25. Now the older son was where? In the field. Where are good sons supposed to be? In the field. The elder son was doing the responsible one, right? The younger son, he's been off gallivanting, loose living, and all the rest. Irresponsible. But this son, he was the responsible one. And when he, like the other men that were out in the fields, came in and approached the house, right? Now, as he approaches the house, he hears, like the others, the music and the dancing. He knows what it symbolizes. Better said, he knows what it represents. If there's music and dancing in my dad's house, it's a party. He doesn't have to wonder, hey, what's going on here? He knows. That's how parties start. There's music, there's dancing. You can see what's going on, you can hear it. What he's supposed to do as the elder son in this culture, wash off his hands and get out there. Get into the party. Help his dad. Greet people at the front door. He really is the one that's supposed to be the host. So his dad can be free just to have conversations. Relax and talk with people. Meanwhile, the elder son is supposed to serve as the unofficial host. And so he'll walk around making sure everybody has enough to drink. Everybody's happy. He'll greet people. So glad you're here. Make sure you have a seat. The food will be ready in just a minute. That's the role of the older son. What does the older son do? Now, the older son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. Verse 26, and he summons one of the servants. He knows them all by name. They're his family servants, his father's servants. So he calls one of them over. He's not in the house yet. He calls a servant over to him. And it says he began inquiring what these things could be. The knucklehead knows it's a party. So he's really not asking, is this a party? He wants to know why there's a party. What's going on here, he says. And the servant says to him, your brother Your brother's come home. The servant knew who he was. Your brother's come home, big guy. And your father has killed a fatted calf because he's received him back safe and sound. Oh, glorious day. I'm so thankful he's safe and he's sound. But that's what's going on? That's what's happening here, you're telling me. Again, he needs to make a beeline to his father. Dad, I'm here. I'll take care of everything. I'll take care of your guests. But what does he do? He's outside interrogating one of their servants. He heard the music and he chooses not to go in. A son with a healthy relationship with his father would go in immediately. A son with a healthy relationship with his father would trust his father. Even upon hearing that the celebrating is for this younger brother of his, who he despises, he would still go in based on the force of the love and the trust he had with his dad. And if he had a real issue, he'd talk to his father about it after the party. But as long as the celebrating is going on, it doesn't matter who it's for. He's going to come to his dad's side and play the host. But he refuses. He refuses. He stays outside. He sees a servant from a distance. He wants answers. So he asks the servant, after he says, your brother's come home, he says, you can't be serious. You're telling me the guy's home? He's back? Well, what did my father do? Did you see? Did you hear the conversation between my father and my younger brother? What did my dad say to him? And what did my brother look like? Did he come back wealthy or broke? In good health or ill? What did his clothes look like? Did you hear anything in the conversation? He wants news. He wants info. He wants intel. He wants to know what's the condition and why in the world is my dad throwing this guy a party? And he chooses not to go in. So not only he's offended his father, he's also offended the guests. This is no innocent son. Oh, he behaved the right way. He's out in the field. He never ran away, at least not physically. But how close is his heart to his dad's heart? As far away as the miles between the younger son and the father. He was a long way away from closeness to his dad. So scene 2. Love approaches anger. It says 28, but he became angry and as we mentioned was not willing to go in. And so what does his father do? His father comes out. It's the second time in one day that the father goes in the direction of a prodigal son. He runs to the first one. And now when he realizes his elder son is not coming in, he does the going out. He does the moving in his son's direction. And he pleads with them. He pleads with them. Again, just as with the kissing of the younger son, it was repeated. The pleading, by the force of the language here, was repeated as well. Son, please come in. You're my son. Come in. As Darrell Johnson points out, if the message to the younger brother was, come home, it's safe to come home. The message now to the elder brother is, come in. Come on. Trust my love. It's safe to come in. I know you're upset, but trust me, come in. The father knew that the elder son needed the same as the younger son. He needed grace. He needed grace. And do you think the father was respected in this scenario? Culturally, he was completely dishonored. Both he, the man of the house that started the party, and the host, the elder son, are not in the party. They're outside. I don't know. I play with things like this. I put myself in the scenario and I'm an invited guest. I want to know, hey, where's the dad? Where's the son? What's going on? I want to go to the window, right? Hey, where's the father? Where's the son? They're out here. Apparently, the elder son has no plans of coming in. And so the whole party moves to the windows. They can see the dishonor. They can see the disrespect. Again, the elder son is no innocent son. He's equally a prodigal. So, the son says 4 things to prove his prodigal nature. But he answered and said to his father pleased him to come in. He said, look, for so many years I've been serving you. I've never neglected a command of yours, and yet you've never given me a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. I mean, not even a goat. 4 things he does to disrespect his father. First is he doesn't address his father as father. At least the younger son, as brash as he was, to ask for his inheritance or his money early, he said, Father, I'd like my money now. At least he addressed his dad as dad. In this case, just look. Here's the situation as I see it. I've been serving you, and I never get anything. So he offends his dad by not calling him even the respect to call him father. The way he forms his argument, it's a lecture. So we see there's really no relationship at all. For so many years I've been serving you. I've slaved for you. Where's mine? This has more the sense of what you would find between an employee and an employer disputing over wages. That's the nature of this conversation. I did this, and this. Where's my money? Where's my recompense? Pay me for it. Where's the stuff you owe me? Wow. Then he has the nerve to say that he's never disobeyed or neglected a command of his. He's neglecting his role as the host in the party. At the very least, he's disobeyed him then. Again, this is no innocent son. He sees love as something that must be earned. You work for it, you do the right things. On the back end, you get devotion, you get care, you get concern, and you better get it because you've worked for it. That's how he sees love. Well, and then, of course, like any one of us whose heart's in the wrong place, he attacks and accuses someone else. In this case, his younger brother. Verse 30. But when this son of yours, the way he describes his brother is he describes him in a way as to put him at the farthest distance from him as he can in terms of the language he uses. This son of yours, he's not my brother, this son of yours, who's devoured your wealth with prostitutes, you killed a fatted calf for him. When did Jesus say in the story that he went off and laid with prostitutes? Now, he does say loose living. I get the inference. That's probably what he did. But do you see how the older son, in his rage and the way he sees life, the way he is being critical of his brother, it's easy to condemn, and that's where you go, a place of condemnation. It reveals his heart. He's filling in the details. Oh, yeah, it's prostitutes. That's what he did. This son of yours. Well, the father should be furious, but he's not. He extends the same quality of love to the elder son as he did the younger. There's no judgment, no condemnation, no anger, no punishment. He is offending his father publicly, and the father just takes it, if you will, on the proverbial chin. And so his father says what? Son, you've always been with me, and all that is mine is yours. To the father he says, look, not dad. The dad to the son, hey son, you've always been with me. And he uses the word for son in the language that is the most tender of words. It's teknon. It means my child. Not boy, you know you've always been with me. Or son, just listen up for a second. No, it's my child, don't you see? You've always been with me. And all that I have is yours. Now, a little bit comical here because it's literally true as well. A third of the wealth went to the younger son. Now, everything that's left is going to go, if it hadn't already, there's not certainty there, but it's certainly designated then to go to the elder son when the father dies. So he's being truthful. All I have is yours, eh? But that's also why the elder son is upset. Who then ultimately is paying for the party? The money that eventually is supposed to go to the elder son. You see how he's thinking? At least that's how I would think. My child, you've always been with me. All that is mine is yours. What an expression of love. It's a beautiful story. So Jesus' story prompts me to ask, do I ever play the older brother? Are there people who by their lifestyle I consider to be beyond God's grace? Or who I think ought to be beyond God's grace? Do I play the older brother? Are there certain sins or lifestyles which I think should disqualify a person for being welcomed home by a loving God? And so what about you? Any responsible elder siblings here? You can probably feel what the older son is feeling. I can feel it. But look at the different focus. for Jesus as he talks about the love of the Father and therefore the Father in this story. The younger son was ready to come home. Just the mere fact that the younger son is ready to come home, isn't that enough for a celebration? And shouldn't the fact that he's home and he's alive, because nobody knows what happened to him, isn't just the mere fact that he comes home, isn't that enough of a reason to celebrate? Focus on the joy that he's back. No, that's not enough. Because this son of yours, don't forget what he did, Dad. Look, I'm right. Just like the sinners who were eating with Jesus. They were ready to listen. Why else would they go to Jesus? There was something about Jesus that prompted them to say, hey, that's a safe place to go. I want to talk to Jesus. I've listened to him before. I need someone like that. And so these sinners that Jesus meets in the marketplace or wherever, and who he invites to eat with him, they're ready. Their hearts are in some measure softened. But the Pharisees, the older brothers, couldn't see that. It's all about behavior for them. So the older son's problem, and to the degree that I have it, it's my problem as well. It's first and foremost that he had not yet entered into the fullness of his own father's love for him. He didn't get the quality, the depth of the love that his father had for him. And for that reason, he couldn't extend love to others. It's the old saying, you can't give what you haven't yet received yourself. Or you can only give what you've received. So he was giving what he'd received. He viewed between his father and himself that this is some sort of a negotiated arrangement. I behave, you bless me. I behave, you give me things. I behave, I get rewards. So that's how he treats everybody else. It proves to us he doesn't understand the heart of the Father. And that's why there's no greater need for you or for me than that we would be touched by the love of the Father. Such that we would know no matter what we would do in the far country, we could come back to him and he'd celebrate. Do you see love that way? Do you see God's love that way? Every word of this parable is by design. Jesus creates this scenario to show us the heart of the Father. And we may think that God, therefore, is too lenient, too permissive. Oh, Jesus, do you mean to say that we can just go and do all sorts of terrible things, and as long as we just walk back afterwards and say to God we're sorry, that he'll throw a party for us and no big deal? Is God that permissive? Is God that lenient? Well, apparently, Jesus isn't worried about how much grace is dispensed. He's not worried about how much grace is given. If someone wants reconciliation, Jesus says God will make sure to make that reconciliation possible. Jesus shows us that God the Father isn't afraid of giving the prodigal a kiss instead of a lecture, a party instead of probation. Jesus is saying that the Father celebrates our return without concern for what we've done or how long we've been doing it. His focus is our return. But don't let us not in any way think that God takes sin lightly. Not the Father in Jesus' story, nor God the Father that the Father in the story represents, takes sin lightly. Not too soon after this, Jesus is going to hang on a cross. And that tells us that God the Father takes our sin very seriously, because it required the death of his Son so that then he could offer the grace. You see, it's the cross of Jesus that does two things. It proves to us that sin is something that separates us from God. It's a serious matter. It proves to us that God takes our sin seriously. But the cross also proves that he becomes the remedy for it. So that once the payment is paid, what is there left to do except to celebrate? You've heard of double jeopardy, right? We all have. If God the Father is going to make me pay for my sinfulness, it's double jeopardy. Because he's told me that through Jesus it's already been paid for. And so God has only one thing left to do. It's celebrate our return. And yes, I understand, and we understand, that God's put certain things in motion so that if I do certain things, there are causes and effects. And so I can create a life that results in effects that are difficult to deal with by my sinful choices. But in terms of my relationship with God, He even stays with me in those things. But He doesn't allow me. He puts His hand over my mouth and He says, don't talk to me about changing your status. You're my son. You'll always be my son. You're my daughter. You can't not be my daughter. I will celebrate your return. So I have to ask myself, how much like the older son am I? The behavior of other people, like bookkeeping and scorekeeping? Or can I simply celebrate their return because they've come back? And pray for them until they do. So, a couple things as we close. Think about the younger son. How do you see yourself? When you take off, is God hoping you'll come back? Does His love just flicker a little bit? I love the words of Jack Hayford. God still sees you as the person He created you to be. Who did He create you to be? A son or a daughter. God still sees you as the son or daughter He created you to be long before you did anything to cause yourself to see yourself as something less than you really are. God still sees you as the person He created you to be long before anything else happened to cause you to see yourself as something less than you really are. And you really are a son or a daughter. So embrace that. Just take it on faith and thank Him for it. If God can get over your sin, why do you refuse to get over it? I'm not saying it's deliberate. We just sort of find ourselves stuck thinking about the events, thinking about the sins, thinking about the things that we did that we wish we could take back. Friend, all the while you're ruminating in the details of your memory, God is saying, I'm over here. It's not just covered, it's gone. I'm beyond it. Would you please get beyond it as well? Let my love get you beyond it. His focus isn't what your memory is taking you to. You go to those places, right? Maybe it's last night, maybe it's 2 decades, maybe it's 4 decades, 5 decades ago. The sin you've committed that bothers you the most, that hampers you the most, that burdens you the most. And God is saying the only way you can get beyond that memory is to receive my love and know that for me, it really is no memory. I know it's there, but it's not there. I've taken care of it. If He can get beyond your sin, would you get beyond it too? Let Him do that for you. And if you're an elder son, oh my goodness, just let God love people. Let Him do the loving and let Him love you, and as He does, you'll love others better. You know, the parable ended there. It ended, verse 32. He said, but we had to celebrate to the older son. We had to celebrate. Son, we had to rejoice. For this brother of yours, he was dead and he's begun to live. He was lost and he's been found. That's where it ends. We don't know if the son went in or went out. We have every understanding, perhaps, at least I think we do, that son didn't go in because he represents the Pharisees. And what do we know? In a few weeks' time, they would nail Jesus to a cross. They just couldn't handle His type of looking at life and love and relationships. So they killed Him. But Jesus, being who He is just as loving in death as He is in His own life. And what does He say from the cross? Father, forgive them. They don't even know what they're doing. So God, just forgive them. You and I, we're going to let them kill me, but we're going to forgive them. They just don't get it yet. What love. Why don't you bow your heads for a moment? As the band returns, just think quietly on your own. Think quietly for a moment. If you're like the younger son, the lawbreaker, and you know it, Jesus wants you to know it's safe to come home. If you're the older son, the supposed law keeper, Just let go of the demands for justice and fairness. Just come in and celebrate with the Father. Talk to God about which son you identify with most and let him speak to you.